Welcome back to Forged in Fire, the channel that brings you the unfiltered, boots-on-the-ground stories of courage, sacrifice, and the moments that define a soldier. We talk about training, about doctrine, about the chain of command. These are the pillars of military life, the structures designed to turn young men into effective soldiers, to ensure order in the chaos of battle. But war has a way of shattering structures. It throws plans out the window. It tests men in ways no training manual could ever anticipate. And sometimes, in those moments of extreme pressure, it's the man everyone underestimated, the one written off, the one told he wasn't ready, who rises to meet the impossible. Tonight, we step into the frozen hell of the Ardennes forest, December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. We're riding inside an M4 Sherman tank, not with a seasoned veteran, but with a young gunner fresh out of training, thrown into the meat grinder. He was considered the weak link, the rookie, the liability. His own sergeant, a man hardened by years of combat, made that painfully clear over a cold C-ration breakfast. But war doesn't care about experience levels. It cares about who's left standing when the firing stops. And by the time the sun set on that brutal day, the rookie who was just a joke hours earlier had faced the most feared predator on the battlefield, the German Tiger tank, and had done the unthinkable. This is his story. He called me a rookie gunner at breakfast. By sunset, I had destroyed a Tiger alone. Before we deploy into this gripping account, I need you to reinforce our position. First, hit that subscribe button and make sure you ring the notification bell. It's the best way to support the channel and ensure you don't miss these vital stories from the front lines. Second, give this video a like. It tells the algorithm that this history deserves to be seen. And finally, drop a comment down below. Let us know what country and city you're watching from. It's always humbling to see our global community standing together. All right, let's head back to that cold December morning. The C-ration coffee was cold, bitter, and tasted faintly of gasoline, just like everything else in this frozen corner of Belgium. It did nothing to warm the ice that had settled deep in my gut, a cold knot of fear that had been there since we crossed the Rhine. I sat huddled on the ammo rack in the back of our Sherman, the Avenger, trying to coax some warmth from the lukewarm canteen cup, but mostly just trying to stay small, invisible. Across from me, Sergeant Steiner, our tank commander, was holding court with the rest of the crew. Johnson, the driver, and Corporal Mac McNamara, the loader. They were veterans. They had the 1,000-yard stare, the easy, grim camaraderie forged in the hedgerows of Normandy and the street fights in Aachen. They had landed on D-Day. I had landed in a replacement depot 3 weeks ago. Steiner wasn't looking at me, but I knew he was talking about me. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble, thick with a Brooklyn accent and disdain. And then the kid, he was saying, gesturing vaguely in my direction with a greasy C-ration spoon, he just freezes. Sight picture perfect. Crowd 88 sitting there fat and happy, and he just chokes, like he forgot which pedal does what. He chuckled, a harsh, humorless sound. Mac snorted. Johnson just stared down at his boots, shaking his head slowly. This was the story of my one brief, disastrous engagement 2 days prior. We'd stumbled upon a German Flak 88, dug in, using it as an anti-tank gun. It was a perfect target, side on, maybe 600 yards. And Steiner was right. I had frozen. My mind went blank white, the crosshairs swimming, my hands numb and useless on the Trevors. Steiner had taken the shot himself, using the commander's override, getting the kill, but the damage was done. My hesitation, my failure, had been laid bare for the entire crew to see. I wasn't just new, I was incompetent. I was the FNG, the liability. Look, Corporal. Steiner finally turned his gaze on me, his eyes hard and flat, like chips of gray flint. He didn't use my name, Private First Class Danny Egan. To him, I was just Corporal, the rank of the man I had replaced, a gunner named Henderson who had been killed by a sniper 2 weeks before I arrived. A man Steiner had apparently worshipped, a man whose shadow I was failing miserably to fill. Look, he said again, leaning forward, his voice dropping. I know you're green. We were all green once. But this ain't Fort Knox. This ain't gunnery practice with flags. Out here, you hesitate. You die. Your crew dies. You understand me? That 88, that should have been your kill. Henderson. Henderson would have had that thing smoking before I even finished calling the range. He spat on the frozen ground outside the tank's escape hatch. Today, we're pushing through the woods towards Malmedy. Recon says it's quiet. Recon is usually full of crap. Expect trouble. Expect tigers. He said the word like a curse. When we see one, I need you sharp. I call the target, you lay the gun. You put the first round where it counts. No hesitation. No book learning about angles and weak spots. Just put the goddamn shell on him. You got that? Yes, Sergeant, I mumbled, my voice barely audible over the hammering of my own heart. He wasn't finished. He leaned in closer, close enough that I could smell the stale cigarette smoke on his breath. But let me be clear, Corporal. You choke again. You freeze up like you did yesterday. I swear to God I will personally throw you out of that hatch myself and let the Krauts have you. You are riding in Henderson's seat. Don't you dare disgrace it. He paused, letting the threat hang in the cold air. Then he offered the final insult, the words that would echo in my head for the rest of the day, the rest of my life. Now finish your coffee and try, just try, to stay out of the way. Let the men handle the work. He turned his back on me then, dismissing me completely. Already talking to Johnson about the route, already focused on the real members of his crew. I sat there, the cold coffee burning a hole in my stomach. Humiliation washed over me, hot and sickening. Rookie gunner, stay out of the way. He hadn't just insulted me, he had emasculated me. He had declared me unfit, a passenger in my own tank, a ghost in Henderson's seat. Every instinct screamed at me to lash out, to defend myself, to tell him about the hours I'd spent practicing, the manuals I'd memorized, the top scores I'd achieved in gunnery school. But what good would it do? I had frozen. He was right. The doubt was a cancer, eating away at the fragile confidence I had tried so hard to build. Maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe Henderson was irreplaceable. Maybe I should just stay out of the way. The command came. Mount up. We clambered into the Avenger, the cold steel sucking the warmth from my bones. I settled into the gunner's seat, the familiar smell of oil, sweat, and cordite filling my nostrils. The seat felt wrong, too big, haunted. I strapped myself in, my hands automatically finding the controls, the traverse wheel cold and heavy under my numb fingers. Mac slammed a shell, standard M61 armor-piercing, into the breach with a practiced, violent grace. AP up, he called out, slapping my back. He avoided my eyes. Johnson fired up the engine, the right radial catching with a cough, then settling into its familiar, vibrating roar. The whole tank trembled, alive, eager. I felt like an imposter, a fraud strapped into the heart of this war machine. Steiner dropped into his commander's seat above and behind me, his presence a heavy, judgmental weight. All right, Henderson. He barked into the intercom, calling the driver by the wrong name. Whether by mistake or deliberate cruelty, I couldn't tell. Move us out, slow and steady. Eyes open, people, eyes open. We lurched forward, joining the column, 3 Shermans and a platoon of shivering infantry, moving into the dark, snow-dusted maw of the Ardennes forest. The trees closed in around us, tall black pines laden with snow, their branches clawing at the sky. The world turned gray and silent, muffled by the snow and the thick swirling fog that clung to the low ground. Visibility dropped to maybe 100 yards, sometimes less. It was like driving into a ghost story, and I was the ghost. My orders were clear, stay out of the way. But my job was to watch, to scan, to find the enemy before he found us. Steiner could dismiss me, he could hate me, but he couldn't take my eyes. So I stared. I pressed my face to the M70 telescopic sight, ignoring the ache in my eyeball from the cold rubber cup. I swept my sector, 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, again and again. Every dark shadow between the trees was a potential threat. Every flicker of movement was a German soldier. Every distant rumble was the growl of a tiger's engine. The fear was a living thing inside me, coiling in my gut, making my breath come in short, shallow gasps. But the shame was worse. It was a hot, burning coal under my ribs. "Rookie gunner, stay out of the way." The words were a rhythm, matching the squeak-clank of the tracks. Rookie, useless. Henderson, dead. I had to prove him wrong. I had to. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for survival. For the simple, desperate need to not be the reason these men died. I stared harder, my focus absolute. My entire being poured into that narrow, magnified circle of gray trees and swirling fog. I would not freeze again. I would not hesitate. I would be Henderson. I would be better than Henderson. I would see it first, and I would kill it. The forest pressed in, a suffocating monochrome world of black tree trunks and white snow, all softened and blurred by the damned fog. It was like driving through a bad dream, a landscape painted in shades of gray and fear. The Avenger groaned and protested, its tracks churning through the half-frozen mud, the suspension squealing with every lurch. Inside, the noise was a constant vibrating cocoon, the deep guttural rumble of the right radial engine right behind us, the high-pitched whine of the hydraulic traverse system. Even when idle, it seemed to hum with potential energy, the rhythmic clank and squeak of the bogie wheels, and the sharp, static-filled crackle of the intercom in my helmet. It was a symphony of mechanical anxiety, and my own heartbeat felt like the frantic drum solo underneath it all. I kept my eye glued to the M70 sight, the rubber cup biting into my skin, already numb. The world through the 3x magnification wasn't much clearer than through the naked eye, just closer. Closer gray trees, closer swirling fog, closer patches of deep, ominous shadow beneath the pines. Scanning, back and forth. 10 o'clock, 11, 12, 1, 2, then back again. My neck ached. My eyes burned from the strain, refusing to blink. Terrified I'd missed the one flicker, the one wrong shape. That would mean the difference between breathing and burning. Rookie gunner, stay out of the way. Steiner's words were a relentless echo, bouncing around the inside of my helmet, fueled by the engine's roar. Every time the intercom crackled, I flinched, expecting his voice, expecting another correction, another reminder of my inadequacy. But he was mostly quiet, just low rumbles to Johnson about speed and direction, or brief, clipped reports to the other tanks in our tiny column, Blue 2 and Blue 3, somewhere behind us in the swirling white. His silence towards me was worse than his yelling. It was a confirmation. I wasn't part of the conversation. I wasn't part of the crew. I was ballast. I was a warm body in a dead man's seat. I could feel the distance from Mac 2. He was right behind me. The loader, the man whose life depended most directly on my speed and accuracy. Normally, the loader and gunner work as a team, a constant, low-voiced patter. AP up! On the way! Target! But Mac was silent, just the occasional metallic clink as he checked the shells in the ready rack. The sound sharp and jarring in the tense quiet. He hadn't said a word to me since Steiner's breakfast tirade. He was probably thinking about Henderson, too. Probably wishing he was still here. Probably calculating the odds of surviving the day with a rookie gunner who choked under pressure. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe the cold, oil and cordite-tinged air. My hands felt disconnected, clumsy lumps of meat at the ends of my arms. I flexed my fingers inside my gloves, trying to keep the blood flowing, trying to feel the cold, hard reality of the traverse wheel and the elevation crank. These were my tools. This was my job. I wasn't a passenger. I was a gunner. I had trained for this. 6 months of relentless drilling, gunnery ranges, identification tests, silhouettes flashed for a fraction of a second, demanding instant recognition. Panzer IV, Stug 3, Panther, Tiger. Tiger. The name itself sent a fresh jolt of ice through my veins. I knew the weak spots, the theoretical ranges, the ballistics tables. I knew the M61 AP round was rated to penetrate 80 millimeters of armor at 500 yards, barely enough to scratch a Tiger's front plate. I knew the HVAP, high-velocity armor-piercing, tungsten core rounds were better, but we carried maybe 5 of those precious hyper-velocity shots reserved for emergencies. I knew the HE round was useless against heavy armor, unless my crazy theory about ground shock had any merit, which even I doubted in the cold light of this terrifying morning. My mind, the book that Steiner despised, was racing, replaying statistics, angles, probabilities. Was this thinking the problem? Was this the hesitation he'd seen? Was it better to just react? To put the crosshairs on the shape and stomp the pedal, regardless of the odds? Was that what Henderson would have done? Was that the difference between a veteran and a rookie? "Column, halt!" Steiner's voice barked, startling me so badly I jerked the traverse wheel, the turret whining slightly. The Avenger lurched to a stop, the sudden deceleration throwing me forward against the sight. "What is it, Sarge?" Johnson's voice tense. "Ahead," Steiner said, his voice low, tight. "Listen." I strained my ears, holding my breath, trying to filter out the idling rumble of our own engine. Silence. Just the dripping of melting snow from the pine branches, a sound suddenly loud in the fog. Then, a snap, a sharp, distinct crack, like a heavy branch breaking underfoot. Off to the left, maybe 100 yards. "Infantry?" Mac whispered over the intercom, his voice barely audible. "Could be," Steiner breathed. "Or just deer. Miller, scan left. Slow. 9 o'clock. I swung the turret, my movements deliberate, trying to be smooth, professional, trying not to betray the frantic hammering in my chest. 9 o'clock. A wall of dense pine trees, their lower branches heavy with snow, creating dark, cave-like shadows underneath. Anything could be hiding in there. A whole platoon. A PK gun. I swept the sight across the shadows, my eyes straining. Nothing. Just trees. Dark, silent, menacing trees. "See anything, Miller?" Steiner's voice was impatient. "No, Sergeant. Negative contact. Just trees. Hold it there," he ordered. Silence descended again, thick and heavy. We sat there, idling, 3 steel boxes full of nervous men, blind in the fog, listening. The snap didn't come again. Minutes crawled by. The cold started to seep back in, deeper this time, chilling the sweat that had broken out on my skin. "All right," Steiner finally grunted. "Probably just deer, or maybe they know we're here now." He didn't sound convinced. "Henderson," he called the driver by the wrong name again. "Move us out, slow, and stay alert. Something don't feel right." We lurched forward again, the tension inside the turret now ratcheted up another notch. The snap had frayed our nerves, reminding us how blind we were, how vulnerable. I swept my sector, right then left, my eyes darting, searching not just for shapes but for wrongness. A patch of snow that was too disturbed, a bush that looked too square, a shadow that didn't move with the wind. "Rookie gunner, stay out of the way." The words felt different now, less like an insult, more like a responsibility. If I was just supposed to stay out of the way, then my only job was to see, to be the eyes. Maybe Steiner didn't trust my trigger finger, but he needed my eyes. Everyone did. I was the one with the 3x magnification, the one whose sole purpose was to stare into the terrifying unknown. I felt a flicker, not of confidence, but of purpose. I pushed the shame down. I pushed the fear down. There was only the sight. There was only the fog. There was only the job. Scan, search, survive. We came to a bend in the narrow track, a place where the trees opened up slightly on the right, revealing a shallow, snow-filled gully leading up towards the ridge of Hill 112. It looked peaceful, deceptively so. "Hold it, Henderson," Steiner ordered again. "Scan right, Miller. That gully looks inviting. Too inviting." I traversed right, the hydraulics humming smoothly. The gully was maybe 50 yards wide, dotted with a few skeletal, snow-covered bushes. It offered a clear field of fire up towards the unseen crest. It also offered a perfect field of fire down onto us. "See anything?" "Negative, Sergeant. Looks clear. Wait." My breath caught. Not a shape. Not a sound. Tracks, wide tracks, Tank tracks, not ours. Ours left parallel lines from the rubber chevron pads. These were wide, flat, barred tracks, German tracks, and they were fresh. The edges were sharp, the snow churned up, not yet refrozen. They led into the gully from the track we were on and disappeared up towards the ridge line. And there was more than one set. 2, maybe 3 distinct sets of tracks cutting through the pristine snow. They had been here, recently, and they had gone up. "Tracks!" I barked into the intercom, my voice sharp, forgetting the protocol about letting Steiner call it. "German tracks, heavy. Looks like maybe 2-3 vehicles. They went up the gully. They're fresh, Sarge, real fresh." The reaction in the turret was electric. "Shit," Mac breathed behind me. "Told you it felt wrong," Johnson muttered from the driver's compartment. Steiner didn't hesitate. His voice was suddenly ice cold, all business. "Okay, change of plan. They know we're coming. They're probably hull down on that ridge, waiting for us. Ambush. Textbook." He keyed the platoon mic. "Blue 2, Blue 3, this is lead. Hold position. We have suspected enemy armor, hull down on the ridge ahead. Repeat, suspected armor on the ridge. We are going to try and flank right using this gully for cover. Blue 2, you follow us in trace. 100 yards back. Blue 3, you hold here and provide overwatch. Watch our asses. Acknowledge." The replies crackled back, tense but affirmative. This was it. The quiet probe was over. We were going into a suspected kill zone. "All right, Henderson," Steiner said, his voice tight. "Up the gully. Slow. Use those bushes for cover. Keep the hull angled towards the ridgeline as much as possible. Miller." His voice changed. It wasn't harsh, but it wasn't friendly either. It was intense, focused. "This is it, kid. No more drills. Those tracks, they're tiger tracks. I can tell by the width. Could be Markofus, could be panthers. But my gut says tigers. They like high ground. Tigers. Plural." My mouth went dry. "You keep your eyes glued to that ridge. You see a muzzle flash. You see a puff of smoke. You see a goddamn bird move funny. You call it. And you be ready. AP is up." "AP is up, Sergeant," Mac confirmed instantly. "Good," Steiner grunted. "Let's go huntin'." Henderson eased the Avenger forward, off the main track, and into the mouth of the gully. The snow was deeper here, the tank's engine straining, the tracks biting hard. We crawled upwards, the hull tilted back, using the sparse bushes as pathetic psychological cover. My gun sight was filled with the image of the ridgeline, maybe 300-400 yards away now. Still shrouded in fog, but the fog seemed thinner up here, the wind stronger. I could almost make out the dark shapes of pine trees against the white sky. Somewhere up there. They were waiting, watching, their massive 80mm guns already laid, just waiting for us to clear the last rise, to expose our belly. "Rookie gunner, stay out of the way." The voice was still there, but it was fainter now, drowned out by the hammering of my heart and by the sudden terrifying absolute clarity of the job I had to do. Find him, see him first, and this time, don't freeze. The crawl up the gully was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Every scrape of a branch against the hull, every crunch of ice under the tracks, sounded like a gunshot in the suffocating silence. Henderson was doing a masterful job, keeping the Avenger tucked low, using the slight contours of the gully, weaving between the skeletal, snow-dusted bushes. But we were still horribly exposed, climbing towards an unseen enemy on high ground, an enemy that knew we were coming. My world shrank to the circle of the M70 site. Ridgeline, fog, trees, snow, ridgeline, fog, trees, snow, back and forth. My eyes felt raw, gritty, burning from the strain and the cold. The fog was playing tricks, swirling, thinning, thickening, creating phantom shapes that made my heart leap into my throat, only to resolve back into a harmless snowdrift or a gnarled pine. Was that a muzzle brake? No, just a broken branch. Was that movement? No, just the wind blowing snow. The tension was a physical thing, a tightening band around my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. I could hear the heavy, ragged breathing of Mac behind me, the occasional nervous cough from Johnson in the driver's seat. Even Steiner, usually a stream of low-voiced commands and observations, was dead silent, his focus absolute, his head barely visible above the rim of his cupola, scanning with his binoculars, trusting nothing but his own eyes. Rookie gunner. The words were still there, but they were buried now, deep under the crushing weight of responsibility. Steiner might not trust me, but the geometry of the tank dictated my role. I was the one with the gun. I was the one who had to make the shot. When the moment came. We were maybe halfway up the gully, 200 yards from the crest, when Steiner's voice crackled, sharp and low. Hold it right there, Henderson." The tank stopped, rocking slightly. "Miller, you see that?" "See what, Sergeant?" My voice was a croak. 11 o'clock, edge of the tree line. That dark patch. Looks like burnt timber. I swung the turret, my movements careful, deliberate. No sudden jerks. Treat it like glass, until you couldn't. 11 o'clock. The fog was thicker there, swirling around the base of the pine trees. But he was right. There was a dark, unnaturally square shape, low to the ground, like a section of burned-out log, except it had sharp edges. And was that movement? I breathed. Sergeant, I think I saw movement. Like something traversing. "Yeah," Steiner grunted. "Me too. Can't make it out. Could be anything. Could be a Stug. Could be a Panzer IV waiting for us to crest." He paused, calculating. "All right. Plan B. We ain't going over the top blind. Miller, load he." My heart jumped. He? Against potential armor? "Sergeant?" I questioned, my voice betraying my surprise. "Did you hear me, Corporal?" His voice was ice. "Load, high, explosive. I want you to plaster that dark patch, not the patch itself, the trees above it. Airburst, ranging shot. See if we can shake something loose, make them reveal themselves before we stick our neck out." It was a veteran's tactic, smart, cautious. Use he for concussion, for suppression, to force the enemy's hand. But it felt wrong. If that was a tank, he wouldn't scratch it. We were giving away our position, our element of surprise, what little we had left. For what? To maybe see something we already suspected was there? But he was the sergeant. He was the veteran. I was the rookie. "Mac," I said, my voice flat. Load he." "Loading he," Mac called back. I heard the clunk of the AP round being stowed, the heavier thump as he pulled an M48 he shell from the rack. "You sure about this, Sarge?" Mac muttered, just loud enough for me to hear over the intercom. Steiner ignored him. "He up!" Mac slammed the breech shut. "All right, Miller," Steiner said. "Target is the base of the trees, directly above that dark patch. Range, estimate 350. Airburst, fuse delay, 0.05. Can you make that shot?" Could I make the shot? Firing he for an airburst effect at a target I couldn't even positively identify, based on a range guess through swirling fog. It was asking for a miracle. Henderson could have done it. Henderson, the ghost, probably could have threaded the needle blindfolded. Me, the rookie who choked? "Yes, Sergeant," I lied, my voice sounding impossibly calm, betraying the frantic panic in my gut. My hands flew, adjusting the elevation, setting the fuse delay timer on the shell through the breech linkage. A delicate, precise operation, crosshairs on the base of the trees. Lead slightly for the wind I couldn't feel but knew was there. Hold my breath, squeeze the firing pedal, gently, crack. The 75mm barked, a sharper, less concussive sound than the AP round. The tank rocked, smoke filled the turret. I kept my eye glued to the sight, counting. 1, 2, 3. Flash. A brilliant orange blossom erupted, right where I'd aimed it, amongst the lower branches of the pine trees. Whoomp! The sound followed a second later, a deep, satisfying crump. Snow, pine needles, and dark chunks of something rained down. "Good burst, good burst," Steiner called out, his binoculars pressed to his eyes. "Right on target. Anything?" I stared, my eyes watering from the smoke and strain. The dark patch. It was still there, unmoving, undamaged, nothing. Negative, Sergeant, I reported, disappointment a cold stone in my stomach. No movement, no return fire, nothing. Steiner cursed under his breath. So it is just a log, or they're good, real good, disciplined. He paused again, thinking. The silence stretched. The burning question hung in the air. What now? Do we risk cresting the ridge? Do we back out? Do we sit here and wait? All right, he finally decided. New plan. Henderson, ease us forward another 20 yards. Stay low. Miller, keep scanning that ridge. Mac, load AP. We're going to peek. Peek, the single most dangerous word in a tanker's vocabulary. It meant exposing just enough of your turret over the crest to see, hoping you saw them before they saw you. It was necessary. It was also how Henderson had died. Henderson crawled us forward, the tank groaning, the angle getting steeper. The ridgeline loomed. Closer now, maybe 150 yards. The fog was definitely thinner here. I could see individual tree trunks, the dark slash of what looked like a trench line just below the crest. My gut clenched. This felt bad. This felt like the loneliest place in the world. 10 more yards, Henderson. Steiner whispered. Easy. Easy. Hold. We stopped, our turret just below the military crest, the point where we could see without being fully silhouetted. Okay, Miller. Steiner breathed, his voice barely audible. Your show. Scan the ridge. Left to right. Slow. Tell me what you see. And God help you if you miss anything. I took a breath. My hands were slick inside my gloves. I started the traverse, using the manual crank now, the movement agonizingly slow, minimizing our exposure. Left edge of the gully, bare slope, trench line, movement. Contact, I hissed, my voice cracking. Tank, hull down. 12 o'clock. Looks like a Mark IV. It was partially hidden behind a fold in the ground, only its turret and the long barrel of its 75mm gun visible. It was traversing slowly, searching. Had it seen us? Range? Steiner snapped. 400. Target, he ordered. AP up. Mac confirmed instantly. My crosshairs were already settling. The Panzer IV, not a Tiger, thank God, but still deadly. Its gun could kill us easily at this range. Smooth traverse. Lead slightly. Hold. On the way. I stomped the pedal. Crack. The AP tracer flew. Flat and fast. A perfect shot. Clang! A direct hit on the turret face. Sparks flew. Hit! I yelled. Good hit! Traversing for another. Loading! Mac grunted. But the Panzer IV, it wasn't smoking. It wasn't burning. It just sat there. And then the turret kept turning. Slowly, deliberately, towards us. He's still alive, I stammered, disbelief warring with terror. Our shot bounced. Or it didn't penetrate. Load HVAP! Steiner roared. Hypervelocity! Get it up, Mac! Now! Loading HVAP! Mac yelled, fumbling with the special, heavier tungsten core round. But it was too late. The Panzer IV's gun had stopped. It was aimed directly at our turret. I saw the flash. Gong! The world exploded in white light and pain. It wasn't as bad as the 88 hit from the training story, but it was bad. It felt like the tank had been punched by God. Spall filled the air again, pinging off the bulkheads like angry hornets. I was thrown back from the sight, my head ringing, the taste of blood filling my mouth again. Status! Steiner screamed, his voice hoarse. We hit? Penetration? Negative! Johnson yelled from the driver's seat. Took it on the gun shield. We're okay. We're okay. Mac? Steiner yelled. HVAP up! Mac roared, slamming the breech shut, his voice strained. Miller, get back on the gun! Kilpatrick, Steiner, I keep mixing up the names from the different stories. Focus, screamed. I hauled myself back to the site, my vision blurry, my head pounding. The Panzer IV was still there. Had we heard it at all? Was the crew stunned? Or were they reloading, ready to finish us? I put the crosshairs back on the turret, but something was wrong. Something had changed. Behind the Panzer IV, further up the ridge, half hidden in the swirling mist and the snow-dusted pines, a shape that made the Panzer IV look like a child's toy. It was huge. It was flat-sided. It had the distinctive overlapping road wheels. And the gun. The gun was impossibly long, impossibly thick, with that menacing double-baffle muzzle brake. It was a Tiger, sitting hull down, watching, waiting. The Panzer IV. It hadn't been the threat. It had been the bait. It was a sacrifice designed to draw our fire, to make us expose ourselves, while the real killer lined up the shot. And we had fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. My blood turned to ice. This was it. This was the end. The Tiger was maybe 500 yards away. Its gun was already traversing towards us. HVAP might penetrate its turret face at this range, if I hit it perfectly. If I had time, Mac had just loaded HVAP for the Panzer. "Wrong target!" I screamed, my voice shredding. "Tiger, Tiger! Hull down! 12 o'clock high! 500!" The panic in the turret was absolute. "Tiger?" Steiner choked out, his voice filled with disbelief and horror. "Where?" "Behind the marker 4, I yelled. "Mac, eject the HVAP. Load AP. Load standard AP." It was insane. HVAP was our only chance against a Tiger's front armor at this range. Why was I calling for standard AP? Because my brain, my book brain, had just made a desperate, terrifying calculation. The Tiger was hull down. All I could see was the turret and the gun. A frontal shot, even with HVAP, was a low-probability gamble. But the Panzer IV, the bait, was sitting directly between us and the Tiger, lower down the slope, exposed. And I remembered something else from the manuals, something obscure, something crazy. Ricochet, deflection, angle of impact, an AP shell, hitting sloped armor at just the right shallow angle. Doesn't just bounce, it can deflect, maintaining most of its velocity, but changing direction, like skipping a stone off water. What if I didn't shoot at the Tiger? What if I shot at the Panzer IV, not to kill it, but to use it? What if I aimed high on the Panzer IV's sloping turret roof, an angle I knew our standard AP shell would ricochet off of? What if I could make the shell skip, like a stone, upwards, and hit the Tiger's belly, hidden behind the ridge? It was impossible. It was a 1 in a billion shot. It depended on the exact angle, the exact range, the exact hardness of the Panzer's armor. It was insane. It was worse than my HE theory. It was lunacy. "AP up!" Mac screamed, slamming the standard round home, confusion and terror in his voice. "Miller, what the hell are you—" "Fire!" Steiner roared, still thinking I was aiming for the Tiger's turret. But I wasn't. My crosshairs were deliberately, insanely, aimed high on the Panzer IV's turret roof. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think. I didn't calculate anymore. I just trusted the insane geometry, trusted the desperate dying hope. I stomped the firing pedal. Crack. The world dissolved in smoke. I held my breath, my eye glued to the sight, praying, praying, praying. The smoke from our own gun barrel momentarily blinded me, a thick, acrid cloud of gray obscuring the gun sight picture. My ears were ringing from the gong of the Panzer IV's shell hitting us. My head throbbed, and the taste of blood was sharp in my mouth. For a half-second, trapped in that internal chaos, I had no idea if my shot, my insane, impossible, insubordinate ricochet attempt, had even hit the bait, let alone the target. The turret was filled with the sounds of agony and panic. Stomper, no, Mac in this story, groaning as he clutched his arm. Mac, no, Johnson, still fighting the controls, trying to unstick us from the mud. And Sergeant Steiner, somewhere behind me in the smoke, probably deciding whether to shoot me himself or wait for the Tiger to do it. But my eye was still glued to the M70, waiting for the smoke to clear, waiting for judgment. Through the swirling gray, the first thing I saw was the Panzer IV, the bait. It was still there, maybe 200 yards away now. Its long gun pointed accusingly at us, but my shell had hit it, high on the turret roof, just as I'd aimed. It wasn't a crater. It wasn't a penetration. It was a scar. A long, glancing, white-hot gouge mark scraped across the dark yellow paint, trailing a shower of brilliant incandescent sparks, like a welder striking an arc. And the tracer, the little red eye of my M61 AP shell, wasn't there anymore. It hadn't stopped. It hadn't shattered. It had deflected. It had skipped. It had screamed off that sloped turret roof at an impossible, shallow angle. A white-hot marble skipped off a steel pond and vanished upwards into the swirling fog that concealed the ridgeline towards the spot where the tiger lay hidden. It was the single most beautiful, most terrifying thing I had ever seen. A perfect textbook, impossible ricochet. My insane theory had worked. Maybe. Had the shell held together? Had the angle been right? Had it cleared the lip of the ridge? Or had it just skipped harmlessly off into the forest? A wasted, 1,000,000-to-1 shot that had accomplished nothing but scratching the paint on a tank that was about to watch its big brother kill us? The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. The Panzer IV hadn't fired again. Maybe the ricochet, the sheer violence of the impact on its turret roof, had stunned the crew. Or maybe they were just waiting, letting the tiger finish the job. The tiger. Where was the tiger? I couldn't see it. The fog had swirled back in, thicker now, obscuring the upper ridge. All I could see was the impotent Panzer IV, sitting there, smoke curling from the scar on its turret. What did you do, Miller? Steiner's voice was a choked whisper right behind me. He must have seen the ricochet through his own sight. He sounded bewildered, not angry, just lost. Did you miss? I don't know, Sarge. I breathed, my voice trembling. I tried to skip it, off the Mark IV, into him. Into his belly? Steiner choked out the words, the heresy, the impossibility of it. You tried to skip a shot, uphill? And then we heard it. It wasn't the roar of an 88 firing. It wasn't the explosion of a tank brewing up. It was a sound. A low, guttural, metallic groan, like a giant beast mortally wounded. It echoed down from the ridgeline, through the fog, a sound of immense weight and pain. It was followed by a sharp, percussive crunch, the sound of stressed steel giving way. Then, silence again. But it was a different silence. The presence on the ridge felt gone. What was that? Mac whispered, his voice shaky, holding a bandage to his bleeding arm. Did he hit something? No, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break through. That wasn't our hit. That was him. I was frantically scanning the ridgeline through the sight, desperate for a glimpse. The fog swirled, teased, then parted, just for a second, like a curtain being drawn back on the final act of a play. The Panzer IV was still there, motionless, but behind it, above it, the tiger. It hadn't exploded. It wasn't burning, not yet, but it was broken. My ricocheted shell, by some miracle of God and physics, had cleared the ridge. It had held together, and it had found the tiger's soft, vulnerable belly armor, hidden from direct view. The impact hadn't penetrated cleanly, perhaps, but the sheer kinetic energy striking that relatively thin, brittle plate from below had done catastrophic damage. The tiger was listing. Its entire massive hull was tilted drunkenly forward, its long 82-meter gun buried nose first in the snow and mud up to the muzzle brake, like a fallen statue. The front right suspension had collapsed. The huge overlapping road wheels splayed out at an impossible angle. My shell, striking from below, hadn't just punched a hole. It had shattered the transmission, broken the final drive, crippled the beast. It was never moving again. And then the smoke started. Just like in my theory, just like the report from Italy. A thin, almost apologetic wisp of gray smoke curled up from the commander's hatch. Then another from the driver's slit. Then a thicker, angrier puff from the turret ring itself. Fire, I whispered, my voice filled with a terrible, cold awe. Internal fire. We hit the ammo. He's burning? Steiner breathed, his voice choked with disbelief. Get us out of here, Johnson, he suddenly roared, the commander snapping back into action. Now, before he blows, try again. Rocket! Johnson slammed the tank into gear, forward, reverse, forward, the engine screaming, the tracks churning uselessly in the icy mud. We were still stuck 50 yards from a Tiger tank whose ammunition was cooking off. "It ain't working, Sarge," Johnson wailed. "We're dug in too deep." "Keep trying," Steiner yelled, but his voice lacked conviction. We were all watching the Tiger, mesmerized by the slow, inevitable, terrifying process of its death. The gray smoke turned yellow, then black. It wasn't pouring anymore. It was boiling out of the hatches, thick, greasy, and fast. A low, ominous hissing sound reached us, the sound of immense heat meeting cold steel and snow. We could feel the heat. Even from here, a palpable wave rolling down the gully. The paint on the Tiger's turret began to blister, then peel, revealing the dull red primer underneath, which then began to glow a faint, dull red itself. "She's gonna go," Mac whispered, his face pale, trying to shrink himself down behind the relative safety of the gun breech. "She's gonna go big." And then, it happened. Not the massive, turret-popping explosion we all secretly feared and expected. It was stranger. A sudden violent whoosh, like a giant gas jet igniting. A solid pillar of white-hot flame erupted from the commander's hatch, punching straight up through the fog, 100 feet high, maybe more. It wasn't an explosion, it was a vent. The pressure inside had become too much, and the tank had turned itself into a giant Roman candle, expelling its own incandescent guts into the sky. The flame lasted maybe 5 seconds, bathing the entire gully in a hellish, roaring light, then subsided, leaving behind an even thicker, higher column of oily black smoke that stained the gray sky. The Tiger was no longer a tank. It was a chimney. A furiously burning, furiously smoking steel chimney, utterly, undeniably dead. We sat there, in our crippled, stuck Sherman, the silence broken only by the roar of the fire on the ridge and the ragged, disbelieving gasps of my own crew. Johnson had stopped trying to move us. Mac was just staring, his bandage forgotten. Steiner was slumped back in his commander's seat, his helmet askew, his face buried in his hands. He was shaking his head, slowly, back and forth, muttering something under his breath. He hit the dirt. He looked up. His eyes found mine. The flint was gone. The hardness was gone. All that was left was a profound, bottomless weariness, and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. Not fear of the enemy. Fear of the impossible. Fear of the rookie gunner who had just rewritten his entire understanding of how this war worked. He didn't speak. He just looked at me for a long, silent moment. Then he slowly, deliberately reached up and keyed his helmet microphone, switching to the platoon net. His voice, when it came out, was rough, hoarse, but clear. "Blue 2, Blue 3, this is lead." He paused, taking a breath. Targets, destroyed. Repeat, enemy armor destroyed. We are immobile, hit, but functional. Ridgeline appears clear. Proceed with caution and, bring a tow cable. Lead, out. He let go of the mic. He looked back at me. He didn't apologize for the rookie gunner comment. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't need to. His eyes and his next words said everything. "All right, Egan," he said, using my name for the first time. He even managed a small, grim, exhausted smile. "Looks like maybe you ain't completely useless after all." He coughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Now, somebody get the first aid kit for Mac. Johnson, keep trying to rock us out. And Egan." He met my eyes again, the commander back, the authority returning, but the contempt gone forever. "Reload this gun, and next time, try not to scratch the paint on the bait." I just nodded, a wave of dizzy relief washing over me, so profound I thought I might pass out. I wasn't Henderson. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't a rookie anymore. I was Egan, the gunner of the Avenger, the kid who had killed a Tiger, alone.